Alexander Graham Bell got his telephone patent on March 7, 1876. 3 days later, the thing still didn't work. He literally received a monopoly on voice transmission before successfully transmitting a complete sentence. And here's the kicker. He only beat his competitor Elisha Gray by a few hours on Valentine's Day, 1876, possibly because a patent examiner took a bribe, and the breakthrough moment 3 days later might involve Bell spilling battery acid on himself and screaming for help. Or that's complete fiction. Nobody knows for sure. Either way, those few hours made Bell immortal and Gray a trivia answer. Law for a device that barely functioned and sparked 600 lawsuits. Your smartphone is sitting in your pocket right now. And let's be honest, when's the last time you actually used it as a phone? Once this week? Twice because your mom called and you felt guilty declining? The rest of the time, it's TikTok, Instagram, literally anything but talking to another human being. We've basically turned the telephone into an elaborate texting machine with a camera attached. But rewind 150 years to a cramped, cluttered laboratory in Boston, and there's this Scottish speech therapist named Alexander Graham Bell, absolutely obsessed with doing something the entire scientific community considered impossible, making a human voice travel through a wire as electricity. Not beeps, not clicks, not Morse code, but an actual voice with all its textures and tones. And here's the thing that makes Bell's story absolutely fascinating. He wasn't some electrical engineer or telegraph expert. He was a teacher of deaf children. His mother was deaf. His wife, Mabel, would be deaf. This man spent his entire professional life helping people who couldn't hear, yet became consumed with transmitting sound. The irony is almost painful, right? But this contradiction, this seemingly backwards expertise, gave him a secret weapon that the real electrical engineers didn't have. And that's where things get interesting. While telegraph experts like Elisha Gray understood electrical circuits and resistors and all that technical stuff, Bell understood something far more valuable for inventing the telephone. He knew exactly how human speech actually worked. Not theoretically, but practically. He'd spent years teaching deaf students to speak by having them feel vibrations on their throats and faces. He could visualize sound waves, understand frequencies, comprehend how your vocal cords create vibrations that travel through air. To Bell, sound wasn't abstract. It was physical, tactile, something you could almost touch. That perspective, that unique way of thinking about sound as vibration first and sound second, would prove crucial. Everyone else was stuck thinking about electricity as on-off pulses like a light switch. But here's the question nobody asked Bell. Why? Why was a man whose mother couldn't hear him, whose future wife couldn't hear him, so desperately obsessed with perfecting human voice transmission? Was it devotion? Guilt? Some deep need to solve a lure problem his loved ones faced that he couldn't fix directly? Bell never fully explained it, and that psychological mystery haunts his entire story. Maybe he couldn't make his wife hear his voice, but he could make voices travel impossible distances. Maybe that was enough. From 1873 to early 1876, Bell was essentially a professional failure. His original goal wasn't even inventing the telephone. He wanted to improve the telegraph by sending multiple messages simultaneously on one wire. The harmonic telegraph, he called it. Practical, profitable, sensible. Except it didn't work. His experiments produced weird humming sounds, strange buzzing, occasionally something that sounded vaguely musical, but nothing useful. Just noise. Expensive, time-consuming noise. Then in June 1875, he had what you might call a promising disaster with his assistant, Thomas Watson. They transmitted what Watson later described as speech-like sounds over a wire. Not words, mind you, not sentences. Just garbled noise that, if you squinted with your ears and used a lot of imagination, kind of, maybe, possibly resembled human speech. Imagine working for 3 years and your breakthrough is, well, it sounds like talking if you really want it to. Drop a comment with your biggest work fail that somehow turned into a win. Bell became obsessed. We're talking round-the-clock experimentation, trial after trial, failure after failure after failure. His equipment was absurdly primitive. Drum-like cylinders, needles attached to thin diaphragms, batteries that barely held charges, wires that corroded. Everything had to be perfectly tuned or you got static. Pure, useless static. And the scientific establishment? They were watching this speech teacher play with electrical equipment thinking, sure buddy, you're gonna make voices travel through metal wires, and I'm gonna teach my cat to do calculus. They weren't exactly rooting for him, let's put it that way. February 14th, 1876. While everyone else was buying flowers or whatever people did for Valentine's Day back then, Bell's lawyer was heading to the U.S. Patent Office in Washington, D.C., carrying application papers for an improvement in telegraphy. Why the rush? Bell knew, or at least strongly suspected, that other inventors were circling the same idea. What he probably didn't know was just how close the race really was. Bell's application was filed first that day. Hours later, the exact time difference is frustratingly unclear, and historians still argue about it. Elisha Gray's lawyer filed a patent caveat. That's basically a hey, I'm working on this, save my spot in line document. Gray was a respected telegraph expert, with serious electrical engineering credentials. Way more credibility than a speech teacher playing with wires. And here's where it gets absolutely spicy. Rumors have swirled for 150 years that a patent examiner named Zenas Wilbur showed Bell the details of Gray's caveat, possibly in exchange for money. Allow Bell to borrow Gray's superior liquid transmitter design. Wilbur himself made contradictory statements about this over the years, which definitely didn't help the conspiracy theories die down. Courts repeatedly rejected the fraud claims, but the whispers never stopped. Why? Because the stakes were astronomical. This patent would become one of the most lucrative in human history, spawning a monopoly that created AT&T and controlled American telecommunications for generations. Million upon millions of dollars riding on whoever filed first that day. So yeah, people had reasons to question everything. The drama was just getting started. Here's my favorite absurd detail about this whole story. Bell received his patent on March 7th, 1876. 3 days later, on March 10th, he still hadn't transmitted a complete, intelligible sentence. Read that again. He got the patent before the thing fully worked. That's like getting your driver's license before you've successfully started a car. Or getting a medical degree before you've successfully diagnosed anything. The patent office basically said, yeah, this looks like it should work. Here's your monopoly on voice transmission. And Bell was probably in his laboratory thinking, cool, now I just need to actually make it work. The pressure must have been intense. March 10th, 1876. Bell was in one room of his Boston laboratory, fiddling with his latest prototype. Watson was in another room with the receiver pressed to his ear, waiting, hoping, probably questioning every life choice that led to this moment. And then, according to Watson's memoir written years later, Bell knocked over battery acid. It spilled on his clothes, burned like hell presumably, and he instinctively shouted, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." Watson, in the next room, heard it. Not garbled, not vaguely speech-like. Actual words, transmitted electrically through wire. He came running, and when he burst through the door, they both knew. The thing worked. Now here's the thing. Bell's contemporary laboratory notes don't actually mention a battery acid spill. Some historians think Watson embellished the story later to make it more dramatic. Others think Bell just didn't write down every detail. The truth? We'll probably never know for sure. But whether Bell spilled acid or just had a regular breakthrough moment, the result was identical. On March 10th, 1876, human speech traveled at electricity for the first time in history. The telephone was born. Messily, chaotically, possibly involving chemical burns, but born nonetheless. And that's honestly very on brand for invention stories. Let's talk about why this was revolutionary, because the technical insight is genuinely beautiful. Previous telegraph systems used intermittent pulses, on-off clicks like Morse code, dot, dash, dot, dot. Very binary. Bell's breakthrough was what he called undulatory current, continuous, variable electrical current that fluctuated in exact correspondence to sound wave vibrations. Instead of on-off, it was louder, softer, higher, lower, constantly flowing and changing. Here's how it worked. Sound waves from your voice hit a thin iron diaphragm, making it vibrate. This vibrating diaphragm sat next to an electromagnet, and as it moved back and forth, it created varying electrical current in the wire. That current traveled to the receiver, where it hit another electromagnet connected to another diaphragm, which vibrated in the same pattern, recreating the original sound waves. Sound to electricity to sound. Analog transmission in its purest form. Honestly, pretty elegant when you think about it. The prototype bell, demonstrated at the 1876 Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia, America's big 100th birthday party, was hilariously crude. A wooden frame held iron cylinders, horseshoe magnets, wire coils, and diaphragms that needed constant adjustment. You spoke and listened through the same opening. No ringing bell to alert the other person yet. You literally whistled into the device to get their attention. Imagine calling your boss today by whistling into your iPhone. Tweet tweet, Johnson, budget meeting in 5. The whole contraption failed constantly and needed perfect conditions. The first longer distance test in October 1876 went from Bell's lab in Boston to Cambridge, about 2 miles. And people treated it like he'd just called the moon. Scientists gathered to witness this 2-mile transmission like it was a miracle, which, honestly, it kind of was. We're talking about something nobody thought was even possible just a few years earlier. The fact that it worked at odd was incredible. You'd think getting the patent and making the thing work would be the end of the story, right? Bell invents telephone, gets rich, rides off into sunset? Wrong. This is where it gets absolutely bonkers. Over the next 10 years, Bell and his company faced approximately 600 lawsuits. 600. Let that sink in. Western Union, the telegraph monopoly, sued claiming they owned telephone rights through Thomas Edison's and Elisha Gray's work. The US government itself sued Bell for fraud, alleging corruption in the patent process. Gray's supporters spent decades claiming Bell was a thief who stole their guy's invention. Tell me in the comments, inventor or thief? The drama culminated when the Supreme Court heard challenges to Bell's patent. Bell won, but the shadow of controversy never fully disappeared. If just one or two things had gone differently in those legal battles, we might be talking about Gray or Edison as the telephone's inventor, and Bell would be a footnote nobody remembers. That's how close it was. Meanwhile, the early telephone itself was impractical to the point of comedy. Want to call 3 different people? You needed 3 separate telephone pairs, 6 devices total, each with its own dedicated line run to each location. No switching, no network. Just point-to-point connections like the world's most expensive tin can telephone. Early exchanges could connect 64 customers, but handle only 2 simultaneous conversations. And the sound quality? Imagine listening to someone garglet marbles while standing inside a wind tunnel during a thunderstorm. That's your 1876 phone call experience. And people thought it was miraculous. Standards were different back then, clearly. Here's a weird one for you. When telephones first started appearing in homes and businesses, nobody knew what you were supposed to say when you picked it up. There was genuine debate about telephone etiquette. Alexander Graham Bell himself insisted people should answer with, "Ahoy," like you're greeting a ship. "Ahoy hoy," he'd say into the receiver. Can you imagine? "Ahoy, this is Karen from accounting." Thomas Edison, on the other hand, championed "hello," which wasn't even a common greeting at the time. It was more of an expression of surprise. Edison's version won, obviously, but for a few years people were genuinely confused. Some would just pick up and stay silent, waiting for the other person to talk first, which created these awkward standoffs where both people were just breathing into receivers waiting for the other to speak. Early telephone operators, who were initially teenage boys, by the way, until phone companies realized teenage boys were rude and kept insulting customers, so they switched to women, had to develop entirely new social protocols. And here's another bizarre. People didn't trust telephones for serious business at first. There was genuine concern that you couldn't verify who you were talking to. What if someone was impersonating your business partner? What if it was a scam? Some businesses refused to conduct transactions over telephone for years because they insisted on seeing the person face to face. We literally didn't trust the technology to accurately transmit someone's voice. Now we trust it to handle our entire banking. How times change. It's wild how quickly we went from total skepticism to total dependence, and we barely even noticed the shift happening. The journey from Bell's crude wooden prototype to your smartphone is genuinely wild when you think about it. The first major improvement came within months. Someone had the brilliant idea to add an actual ringing bell so you didn't have to whistle to get someone's attention. Revolutionary, I know. Then came switching systems so you didn't need a dedicated line. Carbon microphones improved sound quality from gargling marbles in a wind tunnel to actually understandable. Rotary dials replaced human operators. Touch-tone replaced rotary. Cordless phones cut the physical cord. Cell networks made phones truly portable. Smartphones turned them into portable computers that occasionally, begrudgingly, make phone calls. Each innovation, built on Bell's core insight, converts sound to variable electrical signals and back again. Even your digital cell phone is fundamentally doing the same thing, just converting Bell's analog undulatory current into digital ones and zeros. The crude prototype that could barely transmit 2 miles in 1876 became satellites, bouncing your voice around the planet instantaneously. And now? Now we've come full circle to peak irony. Bell spent 3 years desperately trying to transmit human voices across distances, faced 600 lawsuits, nearly lost everything multiple times, built a technology that enabled human connection across any distance imaginable. And we use it primarily to avoid actual human conversation. We decline, call, and text back. Can't talk right now. We send voice messages so we don't have to have real-time conversations. We've turned the telephone into everything except a telephone. Bell would probably find that either hilarious or tragic. Maybe both. Probably both, honestly. So here's what I want to know. Bell invented something revolutionary by being hours faster than his competitor, possibly by bribing a patent examiner, maybe perfected it by accidentally burning himself with acid, and fought 600 lawsuits to keep it. Was he a visionary genius who deserved every bit of credit, or would he just get lucky with timing and ruthless with lawyers? Drop a comment with ahoy if you think Bell earned it, or hello if you think Gray got robbed. And hey, while you're defending your choice like it's a courtroom drama, hit subscribe because we're just getting started with messy invention stories. Trust me, you haven't seen controversial yet.